It's NEEKS jumping right off into your imagination. I want you guys to answer a question for me, completely removed from this case. If I were to search your garbage can right now for genetic materials, how many profiles would I be able to build? Well, for those of you who don't live alone and by yourself, you probably answer to yourself, well, duh, everyone's. Right. I'm gonna jump on right out there, throw my neck down on the line, and go, you know what? I believe this whole matching it to Bryan Kohberger's dad is a way to remove themselves from Bryan Kohberger's DNA, other than their alleged profile that they've gained from the knife sheath. Like, oh, we haven't been anywhere near the dude. We totally got this off the knife sheath. It's been pretty obvious, and Bill has even pointed it out in court, that the defense is going after a frame-up narrative where the police planted the defendant's DNA on the knife sheath. And guess what? I basically know nada about Bryan Kohberger, but he's definitely innocent until proven guilty. And I haven't seen anything that we could interpret to prove his guilt thus far. So what I have seen is enough to make me believe that, yeah, I believe Moscow City PD would certainly plant some shit. And in fact, they've falsified evidence in many cases before. The entire state of Idaho has. So we're gonna go through the timeline and I'm gonna prove it to you. And I'm gonna try to keep it as interesting as possible, so hold my beer. I have at least two posits that I wanna make here. The first one, what if the IGG investigation never even actually happened? What the hell does that mean? Well, it means, remember that time that Bill Thompson was all like, oh, well, never mind, let me just show you.
Ask for DNA workups on other people to the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done. We can't produce something that doesn't exist.
Well, wasn't that about a mouthful? No, it's gonna sound wild, but what if he's telling the truth? Maybe, like, turn over the info. You have the info, you think it's so great, prosecution worthy, then let's just see it. Bring it. But they refused to bring it, and here we are a year later. So in this little hypothesis, let's say that they already know that they want Bryan Kohberger. Obviously, it didn't pan out for some of the other suspect DNA in the house, and it doesn't have to. I've seen a lot of people going round and around. How would they know Bryan? Well, why Bryan? Hello, remember the thing where he did the thing? What's that called again? Oh yeah, a job interview. He was applying for an internship and he applied, wrote about how he was going to help rural police forces. In fact, his job was a research position, a position that would put him in an administrative position, and one in fact where he is able to theorize and hopefully help inundate data the way it's processed and stored and help the police department that he's working for. Remember when Steve pointed out to us how that could be taken in a really negative connotation? Like, oh yeah, you're gonna come around these parts and fix us and tell us how to run our police station, huh, boy? Ain't you something? Maybe that pissed him off. Maybe he got the job since they refused to say that he didn't. Even claimed they didn't have the paperwork. Well, you don't need any paperwork to say, oh, Cat didn't get the job. Maybe he did. Maybe he started going through that surveillance footage. Maybe he started going through body cam footage, since a lot of the Axon video has to be stored and put away in a cloud somewhere. And BK happens to be that dude, right? Maybe there was a reason to frame BK. You don't know? I don't know that there was, but I definitely don't know that there was. You know what they say about open minds?
In 2019, the Pullman Police Department entered into a beneficial agreement with Washington State University's Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology. This collaboration formed a research consortium aiming to maximize the use of law enforcement data and address local research needs. This cost-effective partnership not only saved resources for the department, but also provided valuable experience for a WSU doctoral student, Megan Parks. Pullman Police Department has yet to release an annual report for the year 2022. This, along with the additional evidence that BK might have secured the internship, stirs curiosity. Such evidence includes the redaction of BK's email address, tagged with a censor sticker indicating employment or employee info. Upon being queried by journalists, the department declined to comment, citing advisory direction. The traditional inclusion of the intern in their annual report, coupled with the noticeable absence of the 2022 report, further intensifies the speculation about BK's possible internship. Their continued refusal to confirm or deny whether BK received the internship only adds to the intrigue,
Haters are rolling their eyes and being like, conspiracy theory. Bitch, please. You'll know whenever I'm conspiracy theorying out, because I'll be like, yo, I got something to tell you, but it's some really crazy shit, okay? And I know it's going to sound crazy. Probably am kind of crazy. But here's the crazy thing. But except this part isn't actually crazy, because entire fucking leadership of WSU's police force is forced into retirement. And old Gary moves on from Pullman Police over to WSU. So he is in charge of the guys who would later end up in the probable cause info. And he also gets to personally sign the paperwork where he bars Kohberger from ever coming back to WSU campus. Hook, line, sinker. Now, defense attorneys have made it quite clear that they don't have any idea what's going on. And in fact, the New York Times knows more about the investigative genealogy work that the FBI allegedly completed on Bryan Kohberger's DNA than his defense attorneys. Now, that's saying something. But they apparently know a lot more than anyone, especially since they reported originally they were looking for a Nissan, apparently, to this reporter, according to the reporter. Well, that was a terrible way to say that. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, it's actually a fucking fact that the chief in charge of those WSU cops who are alerting Moscow allegedly about the 2015 car that didn't actually fit the description that they had communicated that they were looking for, but you know, they could just reverse engineer their case, no big deal. And to close out this little part, there we have Gary as a live connection, more connected to this dude than we've ever been pointed towards his connection with the Idaho 4 victims. Kind of interesting, right? Especially for everyone to be talking shit like, yeah, why would they do that to Kohberger? I don't know. Use your imagination. It doesn't always work out pretty for the new guy on the force. Just ask this cop who barely worked for Post Falls for a year after being the new guy there from Hawaii. After he winds up calling in for help on his radio, he doesn't respond back, and it turns out I guess he had a big ol' heart attack behind the wheel. May he rest in peace. Something about this struck me as kind of sinister, but it's pure speculation. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Where were we? Reverse engineering the case. So what if they just said that they got Bryan's dad's DNA, but actually what they got was Bryan's DNA? Whether it be just a mere transfer DNA or what have you, well, now they've got it. As I just mentioned, we already know that they knew Kohberger, so it's not like they just pulled some stranger out of a hat. And it's certainly possible that they already knew who they were going to hone in on, and that kind of seems to be the problem, right? Defense has been pointing out. New York Times knows more about the IGG than we do, and the prosecution has not been clear to the public nor to public defenders about which thing led to Kohberger. Now, a lot of people are not making as big of a fucking deal out of that as it should be. And let me tell you why. Because the scope of that is going to come all the way back to the arrest itself. And it could very well wind up being the fucking gauntlet. You remember when Bill points out, like, we can't just hone in on him because of IGG. So they don't need the IGG info because we didn't use that. That wasn't our probable cause. So what was their probable cause? Because the loose connections to the Hyundai Elantra damn sure ain't it. To reiterate, we're going to talk about the Elantra too, but high and tight on the issue. They cannot just hone in on someone that they want to investigate like, hey, you know what? That motherfucker looks weird. And even fucking Idaho was like, you know what? We should probably have more than just IGG to go off of. Indeed, they should. They should, in fact, probably have that before they even go after the IGG anyway. But I digress. Okay, you guys still hold my beer because I made a little animation, and I hope that this kind of helps connect the dots. Because, I mean, hell, the animation helps even if you already understand the fucking shit because it's so stupid and secretive and annoying. I don't exactly know how we feel about going purely off of this New York Times article, but I mean, considering that Bryan Kohberger's entire defense team was okay with it and his expert witness mentioned it, as well as both of his attorneys, they seem to be pretty satisfied with the info. So according to that reporter, by the morning of December 19th, records had shown that investigators had a name, Bryan Kohberger, and he had a white Elantra. He was a student at the university 8 miles from the murder scene. Now let's build this thing from the ground up. Unlike Moscow, they went backwards, starting out with the two separate and distinct profiles, which Bill Thompson is arguing should be handled completely differently. This is the difference between the SDR and S&P profile. But I'm going to make this a little bit simpler, and I'm going to just call them forensic DNA profile and the genetic DNA profile. Now, according to the prosecution, both of these, so it's going to start from the middle of this animation. Allegedly, they found the knife sheath. There was a suspect's profile hanging out on the button. The forensic team at the ISP lab allegedly were having difficulty getting this entire profile off of the sheath in the first place. Now comes a private contracted lab, Othram, located in Texas, which would help flush out that genetic profile. In other words, it would make it complete. So whenever you have a partial DNA or touch DNA, there are many segments that are missing. It's not a full profile. Well, science has advanced where there is a method where, through the use of human intelligence as well as laboratory technology, they can kind of fill in these gaps and replicate the segments that are missing from the partial profile. This is the human error that you keep hearing defense attorneys respond to, because it does take a certain amount of human decision to fill in those gaps, right? It's a human running a program and going, yeah, okay, program, that's a good idea, let's do that. Okay, now all we still have is a tiny amount of DNA, right? Even when we fill the sequences in. But that doesn't really work in the forensic world. You need control data and you need a lot of it. But that's no big deal. Scientists use a process that's called PCR to make lots of copies of that DNA sample. This is known as DNA amplification. So they put it in there, spins around, makes millions, even sometimes billions of copies. Then that DNA is mixed in a special liquid called a buffer solution. This helps to stabilize the DNA. Now get this, that buffer solution, it can essentially become just another sample in a jar, just like the one you spit in right before you mail it off to 23andMe, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, insert genetic laboratory here. Rarely use the GED match backdoor, that's right, a so-called glitch in the software. It's not actually technically a glitch in the software, and it sort of pisses me off that it's been framed this way. The fucking glitch is that your DNA profile is not counterfeit safe, right? I've never turned in my DNA. 23andMe does not know my DNA. They never received my DNA. So if you get my DNA, you can send it into 23andMe, write Jane Doe on it, and boom, there you go. This is actually how a lot of Indians get their DNA tested, because a lot of nations and bands and tribes have refused to let their members participate in genetic genealogy. Oh, it's like they knew not to do that. We always just thought Mama and Papa were cray. Okay, according to prosecution, it was the knife sheath DNA itself which was the probable cause. Let's go over it one by one. They take the alleged profile off of the sheath and they do the process that we discussed, and they generate two working profiles, an SMP and an SDR, the forensic and the genetic profile. Presumably, the forensic profile just chills there while an SNP profile is created in order to research relatives in the family tree that's relative to suspect DNA. So they get that off the sheath, they make two distinct profiles with it that are pertinent to this fight. According to them, they uploaded it to CODIS and that didn't create any hits, which seems kind of crazy to me because everybody's got a cousin in prison, right? I mean, if you're me, you've got dads, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, but I digress. I guess some people don't even have their sixth cousin in prison. Y'all are hella bougie. No, it's totally on you guys for being bougie. This ain't on me. So Bill Thompson says that they flesh that genetic profile out, do a bunch of investigation on literally hundreds of Bryan Kohberger's relatives, and they decide at some point, okay, they have a name. If we're to believe the New York Times article, then that happened on December 19th. Now, they use this name that they've just recently gotten, and they take it right on over to Kohberger's apartment, search it, search the shed, yada yada. And if we're to believe what they're saying, they had nothing to do with the fact that Indiana police pulled over over Kohberger, which to me is pretty fucking suspect. But okay. More of the story, Kohberger is on his way back to Pennsylvania. Now, a 4-day stalking fest went on. A task force surveyed him for 4 days in his hometown. During this time, unnamed agents, because it doesn't even specify what agency retrieved the garbage DNA. And garbage DNA, while sure, it's legal, garbage is abandoned, right? But there is a formality and a transparency level because it's not exactly on the up and up, even in the LE world. Because, you know, they don't want to dig through your garbage unless they absolutely fucking have to. It'd really be easier to just have you come up there, chill out with them for a little bit, and offer you some drink. Boom, DNA. Digression. So some unnamed agent goes through the garbage and allegedly gets out Papa's DNA. But as I posited, why the hell wouldn't anyone else's DNA have been furnished during that search is very suspect. And I could let that go. But here we have a reporter who is reporting from an unnamed source close to the investigation that Bryan Kohberger was throwing his garbage away at the neighbors. And everyone has literally conjectured about this for a fucking year without going, wait, the fucking neighbor's garbage is also abandoned. So some FBI agents just watching, a Pennsylvania agent, whoever the fuck, Dirty Dirt is checking out Bryan Kohberger, going over to the neighbors, and presumably for some reason, you know, the neighbors, they own their fucking garbage in some other new way that, you know, the Kohbergers aren't privy to. Fucking stupid. I'm cussing a lot in this one, you guys. Let me hit that beer real quick. I don't even drink. All right. I mean, I do turn up. Don't get me wrong. It's not on beer. No, not that either. Calm down. I don't appreciate your accusations. Now, everyone who gives Moscow PD all the credit in the world, it takes time. These things don't just happen. Boom, they do whenever they want that shit to happen because we're kicking up the DNA timeline and it's zooming now because they send back Papa's DNA, allege that it is a match to the forensic profile. Remember that other vial that I said must just be sitting there chilling? We're to presume they did nothing with it yet. We're to presume they saved it right there for this forensic moment. And boom, that's a search warrant. And that is pretty much all she wrote about that. That is exactly why Bill is saying that it was not a part of his probable cause warrant. I mean, again, it's discoverable and everybody has already laid out and decided, even though it's not been brought up in too many cases at this point yet, the American Bar Association has long set out guidelines stating that yes, everything that they've been asking for a fucking year is fully discoverable. But on a technicality, he's not wrong. And technically everyone else is wrong when they're like, they're so dumb that they put it in the probable cause warrant. They did use it as probable cause. It's right there in black and white. But it's not. In black and white is the forensic profile, which technically is in a separate part of the chain of custody. Although it is a chain, it goes all the way back to an original link, which FYI is the IgG. However, the forensic part of it, according to Bill, not only just takes a link on that evidence chain, but it builds a fucking fort on it. And he wants to start the chain of evidence at the fort instead of at the first link. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, Bill Thompson. You guys are probably not as interested enough for me to even go into all of the other ways that this could possibly go wrong, especially when there's not a chain of custody or a complete discovery for the defense attorneys, including the fact that counterfeiting DNA happens, and if they did have a partial profile somehow, but not a full profile, Bryan, technically the dad's profile could help them fill in those gaps that I was talking about, right? Those sequencing and those genome gaps in order to reverse engineer the DNA to be interpreted the way that they need it to be interpreted. But with Bill Thompson over here screaming the whole time that he can't give you something that doesn't exist and there is no IgG information, maybe it all started at the trash can. But either way, again, the biggest issue here is going to go all the way back to the scope of this arrest. And if you get the arrest thrown out, you might as well take those chains and those links and throw them out the window. And while I wish that this was going to be foolproof, I don't know, because I don't trust Anne or Bryan's defense team anymore. They seem to come on strong and hot and do a little bit, and now they're ready to sink him. And that was probably their job all along. I mean, that's what happened in this book that I read one time, if I had read a book about that or whatever. Purely because lawyers get all litigious and shit if you don't make sure you're speculating specifically. Litigious motherfuckers. Why can't they get litigious right now? Don't know. Guess that's just how it goes down in Idaho.
Voices! That's bad!